This video is part 2 of the print in place hinge. As I said before, the prior video ended up being an hour long, so I cut it in half. So this is the second half of that video. It's all been done at the same time, so I can't respond to any of the comments that were in the comments for the first part. Now, before we move on, I just want to say thanks to everybody who's subscribed. As you can see from this graphic, that 77% of the people who are watching are not subscribed. If you do me a big favor and just hit that subscribe button, because obviously that helps me to produce more videos, lets me know that you guys are enjoying what you see. Thanks. And now, without further ado, let's get on with part 2. Now, what I will do in this video, I will make it into chapters, and I'll make these chapters so that if you don't want to watch how to make the comb for the other side, you can just skip that part and go straight on to making the pins. So I'll name those parts in the chapters for you. For this next sketch, I'm going to do another comb. I'm going to actually turn on the sketch that we just did. So I'm going to leave that sketch on just for a reference. Then I'm going to double click this body and make that the active body and create a new sketch, and it's going to be on the XY plane. And now I can see the old sketch, so I can rough out around that old sketch, or I shouldn't say old sketch, the first sketch. So our sketch needs to look something like this. I'm just tracing around roughly because we're going to set the dimensions, so not a big deal. I should try and be a little bit better about getting those horizontals and verticals right. So this should be a horizontal, this should have been a vertical. And we're going to do a lot of the same stuff here. We're just basically doing the inverse shape so that we're taking away the right bits from this one to leave us with our matching part. So we're going to create those center lines for this one, and the center lines are going to be here and here. And that's all we need for this one. And again, I'm going to make those equal, and I'll line these ends up. And now I don't think we need any of the other stuff switched on. So I think we're going to turn all of that off because it starts to get confusing. So I'm going to go back in here, turn off that sketch, I'm going to turn off that pad. And now we can start with our constraining. So first thing I want to do is give this a dimension. And I'll just pull it down there out the way. Okay, so now I have a dimension for that. I don't have a dimension yet for the center, so we're going to do that next. Sometimes you don't get the point that you think you're going to get, but it's not a big deal. And that's going to be spreadsheet dot clasp center, and it's going to be divided by 2 in this case. And then this guy the same. Spreadsheet dot clasp center divided by 2. So that gives us our centers for where these things need to be, and that's really the key to making sure that when it's parametric it stays with the same amount of clearance. And then this guy here, of course, is going to be our spreadsheet. And that's going to be our class width. And I'm just going to leave it at the class width for now. The reason I'm doing that is I want to see what it looks like first, and then I'm going to add the clearance the right way, or the way it should be. Make those two equal. And I'm going to bring all these into line. And I'm going to bring these into line. So now we have the most of it. And continuing then, we need to make this and this symmetrical. And we need to make this and this symmetrical. And of course our middle part needs to be symmetrical with that. And we just need to create our clearances. So we're going to go from there to there, and we'll call that line spreadsheet. Pivot outer divided by 2 plus pivot spreadsheet. I always want to just type before the spreadsheet. Pivot clearance. And we'll bring that up to there. And we need a dimension from there to there. And it's going to be the same thing. Spreadsheet, pivot outer, divided by 2, plus spreadsheet, pivot clearance. And as you just saw, I got to lock this into the center as well. So we'll just go from there to there. And we'll call that spreadsheet dot pivot outer times 3. And that locks those guys up. And then we only have 3 degrees of freedom. So it's this width. And we should be in good shape with that width in a moment. It's also going to be this part, so we need to have a length for that. So let's just we can do that width first. Deselect everything. Whenever it gives you any kind of grief, just deselect everything. That's usually the problem. So this is going to be spreadsheet dot pivot outer times 4, because it doesn't really matter. Okay, and we got 2 degrees of freedom, which are going to be this part here. So what we're going to do is, this is creating the inside part. So that length needs to be at least, that length should be the same as this length, right? So finally, our dimension across here. So that one and that one and that one must all be equal. I didn't catch that line there that time. So again, you gotta make sure that you're getting the lines. When you have these dimension lines over top, sometimes it's hard to get the ones underneath. So I found one that didn't have a dimension line on it. So that should be our piece there, and we need to add clearance. But what we're going to do is we're going to close that first, and we're going to turn on this body, this pocket, and we are going to take this guy and we are going to create a pocket. It's going to be symmetrical. It's going to be our spreadsheet pivot outer plus spreadsheet pivot clearance. Say OK. Say OK. And now we should have a parametric hinge that's fitting exactly. And so what we want to do is we want to add to one side or the other, we want to add the clearance. So let's do this. Let's turn on our sketches. Not that sketch, the pocket sketches. There we go. That sketch and this sketch. And we can see, turn off that pocket. We can see that this sketch here is the one that's cutting those pieces. So if we, on this dimension, we would want to subtract the clearance. So let's go in and do that. Minus the class clearance. Let's close that. See that we now have clearance. So turn that off, turn that on, turn that off, turn that on. And let's go in close. Apparently I still have a sketch on somewhere. It's not a sketch, I just have the body selected. Okay, so we're going to just zoom in. You can see there is clearance there, clearance there, clearance there. I'll show you a good way to test if that clearance looks good. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop open our spreadsheet again and tile them. And now if I make that clasp clearance, say 5, you should be able to see that that is a constant line the whole way through, and that gives you a good idea that we have clearance there. So those are the two halves put together parametrically. You can see this one has a hole in it, this one does not, this one does not, this one does, this one does not, this does, this does. So now we need to make a pivot, and the pivot's going to be attached to this side, and that's the next part. For the pivot, what we're going to do is we're going to make our body the active body. We're going to draw a sketch. It's going to be in the XY plane again. And now we're going to create our pivot. First thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a center line for our pivot, or we can leave it on this axis because we actually drew this all along this axis. So we could just use the axis as our center line. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit on one of these guys. I'm going to hit that sectional view, and then I'm going to rough out the shape that I want for my pivot. So it's going to come this way, and it's going to have a radius. Goes from here to here. That radius is going to look something like that. Here to here, radius. And then between those two, I need a line. And now all we need to do is constrain it. And so we need to decide what should be constrained. And I think the first thing we want to do is to make sure that this dimension is bigger than this dimension, so that we always have a pin sticking out. So let's give that a dimension. Across there. And that's going to be spreadsheet class width plus 1. And we need for that to be symmetrical around a center point. So let's draw a line for that. This point and this point are symmetrical around that line. Boop. And there we have it. It's in the middle now. Then we're going to dimension these radii. Actually, we won't dimension the second one. We'll just make it equal. So we'll say that one, that one equal. So that is done. And now we have 6 degrees of freedom. So clearly we got to line this guy up to here. Again, this is not critical. I'll line this guy up to here. Sometimes you get the line instead of the point, so you just have to be careful where you're picking. So we got those two. So that will get that line positioned. And you can see with this version it goes sort of a blue color once it's sort of closely dimensioned. So we got that guy as well. And now we don't have a distance from here to here, so we need a distance from there. So let's go for our center point, and we'll go to that point, and we'll give that a distance. And he's going to be a spreadsheet, and that's going to be pivot inner, and then we're going to say minus 0.1. Remember that's half, that's a radius, so that'll be doubled up. And then that's going to be tangential. This and this are going to be tangential. There we go. Now we have it. So the thing that we have to be careful of is whatever dimension we make this radius. So we really want to make that radius something based around this diameter. So let's do that. We're going to take that and we're going to call it spreadsheet. Pivot inner minus 0.3. And that gives us our inside piece. So now we have one of our pins. I'm going to turn back on the pocket, and we want to have one of those here. We want to have a half of one of those here and a half of one of those up there. So let's go ahead and draw those out. These ones don't really matter where the back is, but I'm going to just rough them out again. Now, just to make sure you understand what I'm doing here, when I press this guy, these are blue, and that makes them construction lines. When I press that again, they go white, and that makes them part of my sketch. So that's a good one to toggle the toolbar or selected geometry to and from construction mode. So I click that, the toolbar is now construction lines. Click it again, it's now sketch lines. Okay, so for this guy, we're going to do a little guy like this. I'm going to go off here, go here, go here, and then we're going to take this, go from here to here, give it a radius, and we're in business. So that's a similar shape to half of that, and we just need to dimension it the same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this and this are in alignment, and we're going to say this and this are equal, and we are going to say we need a dimension to that edge. So from there to there, we have to figure out how to position this properly. So let's have a look. So for this one, we're going to have to do a little bit of calculation so that we can keep it symmetrical. There's one other thing we want to do here is take this and make it tangency. So we got that, and it's really just a matter of lining that guy up. We need that height, we need the position. Gonna make that horizontal too, make our life a little bit easier. And I should really just position this guy now. So for this one, we need to put this guy in here, and that has to be spreadsheet pivot center. Oh, not pivot center, it is clasp center. Divided by 2. To make sure that's always in the center there. So we want to make sure that we're putting it in the right place. And then this one is going to be class center up here. So I'm going to do another center line for that one. It's going to come through there. And this dimension is going to go from here. Actually, we can dimension it from here to here and call that spreadsheet dot clasp center. And then that's the correct center for this guy. And then the dimension from here to here create that dimension there. I just want to go back and check what this one was. So it's +1, so this is going to be plus 0.5, so it's going to be spreadsheet class width plus 0.5. over so you can see it. Spreadsheet class width divided by 2 plus 0.5. And that will give us that dimension will be exactly the same as the dimension from there to there. So now we have that dimension properly. And then we just need to give this a distance here. We could take it all the way back here, but if we do that, you're going to see it sticking out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to give this a dimension that is something less than this dimension. So we'll call it spreadsheet class width divided by 3. And now that guy is set, and we need to do something with this guy, so we can say this guy and this guy are in line, this guy are equal. And there we have a constrained sketch for those two. And we pretty much just have to do the same thing down here. I could mirror it. I could mirror those over here and go from there. So let's have a look at that, see if we can mirror it. So we're going to select that point, that point, that point, that one, and that one, that one, that one, and we need to draw a line in there that I haven't done yet, but that's okay. We'll do that in a second. So we are going to mirror this around this line here. So select that line last, select mirror, and that's all good. I just need to draw those lines in before I forget. So back to our regular sketch. That line goes from there to there, and we're going to do a line. Oop, we're going to do a line from. Lost my line. Do a line from there to there. The line didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. There we go. Is that one in there? Yep. Okay. So now we just need to constrain these guys the same way. And I think we can do that fairly easily by doing this one and this one to that line, creating a mirror. And there we have it. And now that symmetrical around that, and we just need to constrain everything and we are done. So with a few copies and equals, we're able to constrain this mirror of that. So now I have all my points that I want to be sticking out here. If we look at this guy, are we going to be too wide there? So we've got to have a look and see. This is probably too wide for what we need. Let's just take a look. I see the problem. So this dimension should be divided by 2. because it's only half. There we go. And they're all smaller except that one. So why is that the case? Lined up. There we go. So now, if I turn that guy off, you will see all of my pieces there. And we're going to close that sketch. And we're going to go back this way. And we are going to create a revolve. And that revolve is going to be the vertical sketch axis. If you look here, it's revolved, and put the dots on everything. And then we'll just say OK to that. And so this is my one side of my hinge, and then this is the other side of the hinge. And so they fit together. Now, why do I have an overlap? Because I turned on the pad instead of the pocket. There we go. So now you can see, if I turn that way, you can see our massive overlap that we have. And I'm just going to tile that. And you'll see this massive glass clearance is now going to go down to 0.2. And there's our overlap. So now if we print that, and we print it flat, what will happen is we will end up with a hinge. And the hinge will lay flat like that. Once you printed it, you'll be able to pick up one side and it will close. Now, just a tip for when you create your STL file, what you're going to do is you're going to select this body, hold down Control, select that body, and then File, Export, and then you can export it to your STL mesh. And you can call it whatever you like, and then you're going to take it into your slicer. Now, I've been using, just want to let you know that I've been using the Prusa slicer and having some good results with that. So I may in the future do something that includes the Prusa slicer for you to see how that works. But for now, just export both sides like that, bring it into your slicer, slice it, print it. So now just a quick bit of footage showing the printer at work. And I just printed the first one that I did. The one it's slightly different to the one that you see on the screen, but it's exactly the same design. So I printed it on this TiVo Tornado. I actually have two TiVo Tornadoes. I printed it on this one, and as soon as it was printed and completed, I was able to pick up one side and it was already rotating. It doesn't break anything because it's not actually joined, it's just printed in place. And the way that the pins work is they're literally printed a little bit above the other side of the hinge, so they're not actually touching. So you get a very easily mobile hinge from this. And as I said, this is the new Prusa slicer, so this is only about my third or fourth print with this slicer. So I'm kind of interested to see how it does infills, and so far, so good. As you can see in this part, it's you can see the overlap of the pivot there inside the hinge, and you can see that it's printing it as a separate piece. And there we have it, is the final hinge. And as you can see, it's all printed out flat on the table, and I'll show you how it looks when you lift up one end of it. And there you have it, the print in place hinge, so working. And you now have a parametric version of that, so you can make it any size you want. And of course you can add whatever features you want to either side of the hinge. So it could be a box, or it could be something else that needs to be hinged, you just create that where the outside edges are. I didn't put any holes in it or anything to screw it onto anything. I wasn't planning to use it that way at the moment, but if I did, I would just put those holes in. If you've enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already done it, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Don't forget, if you want something in particular, if you leave me a comment, I will be more than happy to address the comments and see if I can add those things to the video.